So Ryan, Warner Brothers is back.
Yes, yes.
Latest DC entry from writer director Matt Reeves, whom a lot of people like from his Planet of the Apes stuff.
Or Cloverfield.
10 Cloverfield Lane, right?
I think he did
Just
the very first
Cloverfield.
one, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So, which I think we all enjoyed. The Batman is back. Originally, this was going to be the Ben Affleck movie, written, directed, starring. But he stepped away, and then it morphed into the Matt Reeves project with Robert Pattinson as the young Bruce Wayne. This is not a DCEU film by any stretch.
Well, no, not sure what it is exactly, but okay.
But it's definitely not Aquaman, Batman versus Superman, Wonder Woman.
Correct.
So that being said, what we have is this. I think they're just basically calling it like year two of Batman, of Bruce Wayne's experiment in social justice, if you will. And we meet a Riddler and a proto Catwoman, and a proto Penguin. A lot of people like Batman. They like to call Batman like noir. This feels more gothic to me. I'm way more gothic on this one than I am noir.
But not in the Tim Burton sense.
No, not in the Tim Burton sense. There's a lot to unpack here. And not just because this thing runs just a hair under 3 hours. There's a lot going on in this film. When we saw it the other night, critical reaction seemed mixed. You had a very interesting text, and again, I would like to remind people that listen at home, we don't discuss what we think of the film before we do it right now. But your very interesting text was about the reaction of some critics.
Well,
the intensity of some critics.
Well, I will just say that first of all, I don't think anyone should boast in the fact that they don't like something. That's the first thing that rubs me wrong. I think that's what's part of what's wrong with film culture in general, is the celebration of things we hate.
Right.
But if you're going to hate something, you better darn well hate it for like really. Well, it doesn't have to be good reasons, but your reasons can't be
it sucked,
or they have to have some merit. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
Anyway, I don't think this film was above criticism by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think if you're going to hate something, you should probably have a legitimate reason for hating it, rather than, and maybe ultimately that they will find what that reason actually was. But the hot take that was going on was just was ridiculously two-pronged, and both prongs were pretty poor takes.
Okay, that's fair. Let me start with something, and then I'll let you respond to that. Let's start easy. Let's not have a really vehement hot take. Let's discuss. I want to just call this a solid detective story that happens to feature Batman.
I think that's accurate. It's the most detective of the Detective Comics films. And it's funny because Batman's always been a detective in the films, but there are a few things that this movie does that none of the other films have done, or that are radically different from the other films. But yes, there does seem to be a bigger emphasis on sleuth. He's being a sleuth rather than a straight out brawler.
Right. Shades of LA Confidential, which more noir than the gothic that I want this to be, but stylistically I couldn't help but notice that.
Well, right.
No, it just I just think it's an interesting. I mean, yeah, LA Confidential was great. I love LA Confidential. And there's only really so many ways to do certain things, but I think the storyline that they've chosen for this film with this Batman fits perfectly with this version of Gotham City, and that's okay.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I think there's yes. I think the general setup of this is interesting. I think it's provocative in that it's doing, something that it's not provocative in the same way that, Batman versus Superman was,
No.
which was just provocative in the sense that let's just be the bull in the china shop and smash everything and see if anyone cares.
Right.
No, this was more of let's do something familiar but not familiar. Let's take some risks, and whether or not those pay off, we'll discuss here. But yeah, I mean, the thing that I like more than anything about this film is that it doesn't feel like any of the other Batman films we've seen. You really couldn't drop characters from the other Batman films into this and have them work quite right. You couldn't drop this Batman into the other universes and have it really line up quite right. And to me, that's pretty remarkable considering, I love Spider-Man, but you take any of those three Spider-Men, and this is oversimplification, but they literally can sit in the same movie together.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think you could actually get a bunch of these Batman, and part of it's the Batman himself, the character.
Right.
But I think that to me was I don't know if it was surprising, but that was probably my favorite thing, is just that the fact that it doesn't feel like every other or any other Batman. And particularly, I mean, when you think Batman's not that really complicated of a character. I mean, he is a complicated character, but as far as the setup of him, I mean, he's a rich guy who has toys and fights crime.
Yep.
I mean,
sure.
There's not like a big debate over his origin story, really, necessarily. We all kind of actually know
it.
I mean,
it's like the Spider-Man story.
Yeah, I mean, so we don't see it in this one very much, anyway.
Right.
Which is again a wise decision. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. No. So you talk about this Batman.
Yeah.
And that Batman is Robert Pattinson.
Robert Pattinson. Moody Robert Pattinson.
Moody Robert Pattinson. I think last seen in Tenet.
Probably, yeah.
And long, discovered in those other movies. That other
Harry
franchise.
Potter. Harry Potter.
Yes, Harry Potter. Yes, that franchise. That's the one we use. He's man, if anyone's clinging to anything, I think of his past, this film just chucks whatever's left in the trash can.
Oh, there's no sparkle here.
No, there is definitely no sparkle. But the rest of the cast, let's talk about it. So we have Proto Catwoman. Selena Kyle is Zoe Kravitz. The Riddler, who is not Edward Nygma, but he is an Edward. Paul Dano, who's great. Colin Farrell is Oswald Cobblepot.
Completely unrecognizable.
Andy Serkis is Alfred. And Jeffrey Wright is Commissioner Gordon. Well, not Commissioner yet, Gordon.
Yes.
It's Captain Gordon, I think, maybe, or Lieutenant. Who knows? But he is not. He's just Jim Gordon. And then you look at the rest of this cast. Barry Keoghan shows up in a minor role, but we saw him as a co-lead in the Eternals. John Turturro's in this thing as a fairly major character or important character in a lot of ways. So we get this, like I said, this Gothic Gotham City, and we're trying to figure out the Riddler is killing people, which is weird for all us old Riddler fans. because the Riddler was not
Sure.
just this Zodiac-esque serial killer. And that's what we have here. But I'm okay with that.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah. I think he's more of a David Fincher villain than we're used to seeing in comic book films. But again, that's the tone they're going for. And
yeah, and it's one of the comments I heard coming out was that this is today's generation's Batman, in the sense that folks like me might say Keaton or even Batman 66. And then one generation back will be we'll have Affleck, because that's the movies they started Batman with. I don't think this Batman is exclusionary. I don't think he's exclusive to one. I don't think previous Batman fans can discount this Batman.
Well, the things that I would have issue with that is I like Christian Bale a lot. I like Michael Keaton a lot.
Right.
I don't usually. They both can be Batman. If that makes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't tend to think that way, but I mean I don't know. I'd have to think about that, but I don't see this. To me, they're kind of the opposite in a way. They're going back to what he was in the very beginning. So, it is obviously a contemporary modern setting, but kind of the origins of the character.
Well, at least that original core concept.
Yeah.
So yeah, not. I mean, he still has some toys.
Yeah, he does, but they're not the emphasis.
Right.
There's no scene really where it's like, oh, and let's take a tour of the armory, which I don't mind.
So I just had this thought. So tell me if I'm completely off base. I think if you would like to compare the Batman saga to the James Bond franchise,
no, absolutely.
I think a lot of the concern with the Roger Moore James Bond was that it was way too gadget heavy.
And this would be more of the Daniel Craig.
This would be more of the Daniel Craig going back to the Connery.
Yeah.
Where it was more physical and basic.
But I think I think it's a more radical thing in the Bond series. I do think that's absolutely. I think this is kind of the. But I think most of the time, at least the Bale Batman was, I think, also in the Daniel Craig sort of mode, at least in tone.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, this is less about the toys. I mean, he's got an awesome car, but he's got a pretty normal motorcycle, and
yeah.
As far as gadgets go, he doesn't. I mean, he's got some great contacts, and
that is also true.
But even those are sort of strangely,
they're almost pedestrian.
Yeah, well, and just the quality and whatnot. I mean, there's the technology in here is kind of strange in that it is kind of this mix of old and new.
Yeah.
Like it feels limited, almost like a 1980s vision of the future or something, which is kind of interesting as well.
It is. Well, because I mean, this Gotham is kind of, it does exist in this weird, you're right, this weird kind of chronology, because there's a lot of really modern stuff and then there's a lot of not, some obsolete or archaic type touches, I guess. So yeah, that it is an interesting bit of design, world building, I guess.
And it may be that Batman just, likes the retro style things.
Well, and to be fair, I say this a lot. It's like, if something ain't broke, sometimes the old crap is the better crap. You know what I mean? Yeah, you may have made a newer one and a shinier one and a flashier one, but it's not actually better. And in a lot of cases, it's worse, of whatever. I mean, let's blow this up on a grand scale. There are a reason that the B-52 and the A-10 are still in service.
Sure.
Because you literally can't replace them no matter what. They keep trying and they keep failing to build something better than this crap that is, in the B-52's case, 70 years old.
Yeah.
So you figure that, more mundane, Batman technology, of course, there's going to be older crap that works, even in a newer world. So, it makes sense, but it does add, if you look at it that way, it does add a little bit of a weird feel to it.
It's an aesthetic.
Yeah. I was okay with this film. I mean, I was like I was 100% okay with this film. My one gripe is, yes, I would have tightened the edit up, but I'm not upset that the thing pushes 3 hours.
I think, all right, I'll let you in on a secret. I've seen it twice.
Yeah.
And I do think it could tighten up. That's the second viewing. There was I think the first viewing you're kind of overwhelmed in a sense,
right?
Not in a bad way. But
no, like I said, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, and I think that for me, I do think that there's probably 15-20 minutes you could take off of this. Now, where exactly is that? It's more more of a tightening up. Matt Reeves, and I hadn't really noticed it in other films, but this one there are some times where he will do 3 or 4 shots, but he only needs to do one. And there's a scene where Bruce Wayne and Selena Kyle are on motorcycles, and we really only need 2 shots. And he gives us 6 sort of thing. And so there's some establishing stuff that's in there that maybe you could shorten and trim a little bit. So it's not really story stuff. It's stylistic stuff that I think that he could have slimmed back on just to give it a slightly tighter sort of feel. But I get it. But for a 3-hour movie, it's there's not a lot of fat.
Right. So what I think is funny is I saw a story where I guess his original cut was 4 hours, and test viewings showed him where he could tighten up and get, and this is the phrase that always gets me, it's a more cohesive story at nearly 3 hours. But I agree with you in that a lot of the stuff that I would, when I say tighten the edit, my big gripe with Snyder is the slow-mo drama walk.
Sure.
Anytime he brings that in, he literally adds 4% to the runtime.
Yeah.
At least. Matt Reeves doesn't have that. But he has he has a lot of lingering shots.
Yeah, he lingers.
He lingers a lot.
Yeah.
And he could probably cut 7 to 10 minutes just in lingering shots and drop this to 245. But you wouldn't be missing anything. You're right. You would not be missing anything. I said, but they're pretty shots, which is why he lingers on them. But it's at 3 hours, man, you got to do something.
Well, if you think about the very first shot of the movie, and it's a POV shot kind of through goggles, and we see a whole little scene
of a building across the street.
It's a building across the street. You see a little boy in a ninja outfit because it's Halloween.
Yep.
Who sword fights his dad and then leaves, and that's he's establishing things there. But with that said, it does seem to go on maybe longer than it needs to, because really what they're establishing in that scene is that the kid has gone trick-or-treating and dad is home alone. And they don't really do a great job of establishing that.
Yeah.
Until they talk about it later. So there's a few things here and there that, they could have made it, I guess, less stylistic, but at the same time, do you not want Matt Reeves to be stylistic?
And that's why I said I said, yeah, you could tighten it up, but I'm not upset that it's nearly 3 hours long.
Anyway, so yeah,
it's like that, but that's my gripe. It's like, man, tighten it up. But since you didn't, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
that's like my biggest gripe.
It would almost be a situation where I bet you there's just stuff that he loves, that he couldn't let go.
Oh, every director, every director,
and every artist, in general. So, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the artsy stuff. Then let's talk about this. Every time I heard the Batman theme in this, my first thought always went to the Imperial March. Every time it started, I wound up at Darth Vader, and then I had to force my brain out of that to go back to Batman. I don't know that I agree with all of the song choices in this film. I thought
score wise, or
the score, all the orchestral stuff. Except for the fact that I kept going to the Imperial March.
Yeah, well, they do use one song twice. That's kind of strange in the way that it's used, because nothing else is really used quite in the same way that is.
But I just think that some of the actual songs, they're not mine. So maybe, they don't really work for me, but
I guess
that becomes that's not my music kind of thing.
Well, and it also becomes, okay, so is this set in the 90s?
Right. It did have a very 90s kind of grunge feel.
Is that where?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, again, there's a, yeah. I don't know. I wasn't all that. I don't think the score was great. I don't think it was terrible. I thought it was okay.
Okay. Let's the cinematography, which again, let's go back, to his lingering shots and everything else, and he's establishing shots. But no, other than that, the cinematography, I think everything looks great. I mean, it's very muted. This is actually like a darker film than a Snyder film, but I like that more here than I did, say, in the Snyder cut of Justice League. Because this does feel, it feels like legitimately dark, not just moody dark, I guess. I can't think of a way to explain the difference between the two.
I had to think, and I still think, it's like, did any of this actually take place during the day?
I think only the memorial service.
Yeah, I was going to say,
I think was the only thing.
Because, and I think that's interesting. To me, but I think part of what is different and why that is this movie has very, very, very little Bruce Wayne, lots of Batman.
I was going to say, because even Nolan, half of his stuff was in the day, but that was because that was Christian Bale being Bruce Wayne, and it divides Bruce Wayne from Batman, the day and the night. And you're right, the majority of this film is Batman, not Bruce Wayne.
There's have a breakfast scene. There's but yeah, generally speaking, and that does some interesting things in the sense that it kind of dehumanizes Batman a little bit.
Yes,
and I think that ultimately could be problematic if that's what they kept doing. Because, but I don't actually, I know pretty much based on where this narrative goes that is not the plan.
Right.
But it's an interesting choice for this, because we don't get the human side of him pretty much at all.
Right.
And that's different. And again, I think maybe in the short term it works, but I do think if they kept doing that, ultimately it wouldn't work, because we needed something to connect with. And this is, that's an interesting about this film, is I don't think it's looking for connection so much.
No, it's really not, because Bruce Wayne has isolated himself, and he doesn't even. I wrote that this is it's kind of a family drama, but that family drama is Bruce Wayne and Alfred.
Yeah,
But
well,
then even Alfred's screen time is so limited.
well, and Alfred, their relationship is completely different. He's yes, a butler, but he was also more of a kind of a head of security sort of individual.
Yeah.
There's a tension that exists between the two of them that typically isn't as tense, I guess.
Right.
There is almost I give up. I don't even understand you. Couple of moments, sort of thing.
I think we're used to Alfred kind of being like the kind grandfather,
and that is not
Bruce, that is not the Andy Serkis version. It's like the uncle that was in the army.
Well, and the irony here is, and this to me is, and they don't do this, but this is kind of compelling. You've never seen Alfred as someone who could actually do anything more than work in the lab as part of this team.
Mm-hmm.
The Andy Serkis Alfred, I think that you could say he could go out and do stuff, that he would be more than just the guy hanging out in the lab. That there's a, I mean, part of it's his age, but part of it's just the performance of, it's just different.
Yeah. So let's talk performances. Again, Zoe Kravitz, Colin Farrell, Paul Dano, Jeffrey Wright. I was surprised. I came out and I actually said this. I said, I was surprised that there was no performance that I didn't like. Because normally there's one where you're like, oh, you know what? That just didn't work for me.
And the hinge, the one that is going to be the one that divides people is Paul.
Yes.
And it's how do you do crazy? And in a weird way, this is not a comic book movie. It doesn't really feel comic booky,
right?
And so I think Paul's performance, there are going to be people who just think it's too much or it's too a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, but because of what his character leads to by the time we get to the end of the film.
I think
that segment, that that final act of this film, that is going to be the one that people talk about. And I mentioned it afterwards. That's a part that there's a lot to unpack in this, a lot of socio-political commentary that may or may not have been intended, but or specifically intended, I should say, but it's going to be there and people are going to be able to. I hate when people use pop culture to justify as opposed to illustrate, you know what I mean? Sure. So people will grab onto things in this and say, see, or just kind of use it to validate what they may or may not think or believe or whatever. And so I think that ending act of the film is going to get a lot of talk, just in our current political climate, but I believe it's just indicative of the overarching point that the film is making is trust in institutions.
Sure. Yeah. And there's a lot of distrust and there's a lot of and that's another, there's another thing that's different about the Wayne family is presented in a much different way in this film as well.
Yes.
And that is that going to upset people? Well, maybe. But it's interesting to me.
Well, here's what's funny. I just finished editing, and people might listen to it before they listen to this. We discussed the Lincoln docuseries, and about how they kind of dissect Abe Lincoln and how he's been presented, and how so they do a deep dive, and he's much more complex and nuanced. That's basically what's going on here with the Wayne family.
Yeah, because this is usually movies simplify things and we deal in black and white. This is a movie that's there is lots of shades of gray in there. you can debate, and part of what I think the film is debating is Batman a good thing? Even if
Right.
he's fighting, even if he himself is doing good, is Batman a good thing? And that's always kind of existed in the fringes. He's this vigilante. Do we accept him? Do we not accept him? Sort of thing. But I think it's even more focused in this one, because it goes outside of just Batman and his inner circle. There's more shown here, I guess. Than some other of the films.
Yeah, and like I said, the deep dive into Thomas and Martha Wayne was kind of interesting.
Who are in the movie very little, actually.
Yes.
I mean, this is when the deep dive is mostly there's a video that kind of unpacks things, which is a little easy for a story, but is also exactly, I think, how it would be displayed in the in a contemporary YouTube environment. So is it lazy? Not so much. It's convenient,
right?
But anyway. But yeah, so there's all sorts of stuff going on in this, and ultimately it's even more complex than it's initially made out to be.
Yep. Because everyone's a liar. Because Gotham is corrupt. Gotham is corrupt.
Yeah, but and yes and no.
Yeah.
I mean, anyway.
So yeah. So where do you fall? Where do you want to put the Batman? Just as itself, and then in the grander scheme of things.
Well, okay, I think there are some plot points in this film that are a little contrived, and they stand out a little bit more in the second viewing than they did in the first viewing.
Okay.
It's interesting in that, and I'm not going to go into them necessarily here because I mean, if you see the film and you don't see them, you don't see them, and great,
right.
I think generally speaking, it's a good movie. And I think I liked it more the first time than I did the second time. I some of the things that I wasn't completely sure about in that first viewing, kind of, I was less sure about after the second. But with that said, I think what they are doing is far more interesting than what most people are doing with comic book films and adaptions and things, and the like I said, it's the fact that this doesn't feel like other films that works the best for me.
Right. I use it tonally. These are two different films that I'm about to talk about, but this is like DC's version of The Winter Soldier, in that The Winter Soldier was a spy movie that happened to have Captain America.
Sure.
And so this is a detective movie that happens to have Batman. But obviously two way different approaches to telling those stories. Even though Winter Soldier was a little dark in places, but it was not Batman dark. But
few things are.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So okay. So you think it's a good film? I think it's as good as Nolan.
See, and
but they are different. I didn't say it's better. It is different, and in its way, I think it's as good as Nolan. And I love the Nolan trilogy. And I was disappointed when he left DC, because I think that's when it went off the rails. But that's where I stood. I think it's a good to great. Now, if I see it again, that might change. Maybe I'll throttle that back a little bit. But on one viewing,
I think that the Nolan films stand up better over second and third experiences. And let me be, I did not, it wasn't that I didn't like it the second time.
Right.
It was just a few things that went, could have been a little smarter.
Right.
Or, just little things. And it's almost, it's the nitpicking pass, if that makes sense. You know, you go through and go, well, yeah, that almost works, or yeah, but what if they had, you know, I mean, you start really digging into it, and I think a lot of films, you know, kind of fall apart a little bit on their second viewing. But I like it. I think it went. I think after the first viewing, I would have given it, you know, an 8 out of 10, and after the second, it's down to a 7. So it's not like a dramatic change, but I do think it was a change. And but that said, I do think that they did stuff that sets up the universe in a way that I'm okay with, and I'm all right with, and I'm interested in seeing where that goes.
I know they're talking sequel, and I don't know that I care for that.
Well, I think the thing about the sequel would be it would be a radically different Batman, because the journey that he takes in this, because he does take a journey, and he, you know, by the end, he is a radically different person than he was prior to the film, you know. So yeah, I mean, I'd actually like them to do a second one so they could tighten up a few of the things that I was kind of a little disappointed in.
That's fair.
This first time, but I think part of it is I like the idea of Batman as a cerebral, and I guess
as a detective.
And I guess Keaton's was kind of that way too. But but still, this feels nothing like the Tim Burton films.
No, it doesn't even it doesn't even feel like the Nolan films.
No,
so
you know,
it is different.
But you know, look, if you only like Batman, if it's the original TV series or Joel Schumacher's version with the campiness and the silliness, you'll hate this movie.
Yes.
If you thought the Nolan films were too dark, I don't know. This is radically darker than the Nolan films,
but it's not a lot lighter.
No, it's on par. There's a couple scenes that are really quite gritty. I think Nolan's had a little bit of more of a comic book feel to it. You know, and part of it has to do with the villain.
Yeah.
Or, you know, we don't have a Two-Face in this, or, you know, most of there's not a lot of prosthetic work, or
except for Penguin.
Except for, well, okay, yes, but he's different in that it's, you know, but you know, with this version of the Riddler, he doesn't have a costume in this traditional sense. He does have an outfit.
He has a disguise.
Yeah, I see it kind of as a uniform.
Yeah, only in terms of how it plays out by the end. Yes, that would have been where I would have gone.
So
his uniform.
Anyway, but you know, so there are aspects of this that just it's kind of like, in a weird way, I hadn't really thought about this, but you know, when that first X-Men film came out, and everyone was, oh, how are they going to do the outfits? How are they going to do the, you know, I mean, are they going to wear spandex? Are they going to, you know, there was all this sort of debate over, you know, how is, you know, and they went, you know, really pretty mellow and practical in the initial couple. It did kind of go off the rails a little later on, but initially, you know, it was grounded in, you know, could you buy these things in the real world? And, you know, and Batman's suit is a leather, you know, suit. There's a lot of leather in him and in Catwoman. They're both leathered up.
Yep.
But his suit isn't all that. I don't know. His suit isn't all that.
It's not fancy. Much. It's functional.
No. Yeah.
It's very bulletproof.
and that's a and it's not a lot else.
No, it's very practical. It's very practical Batman costumes, which
it does have a nice paper cutter too.
That's true. Yes,
so he can get into crime scenes.
Right? It's a multi-tool.
It's a Swiss Army knife.
Cuts power lines too. So
you're right. Okay. Anyway, look, I do think that there are going to be people who hate this movie.
And if they do, I think they're missing the point.
Well, probably yes. At least thinking of the arguments that were made as we walked out of the theater. I do think, if you're looking for an action film, you can dislike this film because there's not nearly as much action as you would expect from a Batman film. There is action,
right?
It's just intermittent. No, I think it's an interesting film. I think it's flawed, but I think it's interesting. I think people should see it and decide for themselves. Where it ranks is going to be really personal. I think. I put it. For me, I'd probably do Nolan, Burton, then this. But they're all strangely different.
Yeah, and they are strangely different.
They are doing, different things. Their priorities are different. So
yeah, no, that's fair. That's a completely fair assessment of it. Like I said, I liked it more than you, but apparently, maybe like I said, I might throttle back a little bit when I see it again.
Yeah, but again, let me
but maybe not.
But having seen it twice, there is that part that you're just going, okay, the second time you view differently the second time as well, like, particularly as a critic going in. Almost the first time I watched it more as, I don't know, a fan, I guess. And I just said, okay, what's my general feeling about this? And, I ended up interviewing Andy Serkis, which was thrilling.
Awesome.
So part of it was kind of like, okay, what are they doing here with the characters? And it was in the second time through, where it was a lot more of the actual plot details and things that's the way that the mystery unravels, I suppose. That I think could have been done a little better.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's the big release this week is the Batman. Let's talk about what's coming up. I know we've got a couple films to screen this week. I think we're actually gonna have two this week from Disney.
Yeah, Turning Red. I think I've seen extended sections from this. I did some interviews with the filmmakers, and I think this could be a great film.
It looks entertaining. I don't know why people would be.
I can tell you why people would be upset about it, because it's made by women and it's about Asian characters.
Can you tell that it's made by women by watching it? I probably, if I went in, I wouldn't know that. Whatever. I'm going to evaluate it for what it is.
Yeah. Anyway, but I think it has the potential of being a really a great, fun, and yet smart film.
There you go.
So I'm excited about getting to see the whole thing rather than just chunks.
Yeah, and what's the other one we got? I don't have my list.
It was another Disney thing that
it is another Disney. Oh, better Nate than ever, or more Nate than ever, better Nate than never, or than ever. It's a musical, so we'll have to see how that plays. And then I don't even know what's coming out the week after that, truth be told, because I'll be in Hawaii. The week after that, there's one coming out. I think it was a Sundance film called The Outfit. which
not it
we'll
was.
be getting a screener for that after Hawaii. So I will be getting a screener for that after Hawaii. I think they're doing it in theaters the week before or the week I'm gone.
Yeah.
So, but that trailer looks good. That, you know, Mark Rylance, it's like he never looks the same.
No.
In any freaking movie he does. It's insane. I'm like, Jesus, man, that guy's incredible. But it looks good. So I'm really looking forward to that one as well. And again, we're getting into that season where movies are going to start coming at us pop, pop, pop.
Yep. Well, and it's going to even be crazier because of Disney Plus. Because we're also going to be getting a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
All kind of I mean, it's going to be pretty packed.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time to stream, let's put it that way. So but we're going to cover all of that as it comes up, but know that those are out there. And honestly, let's stop and think about it. We're like, what, 2.5 months away from Doctor Strange now at this point.
Yep. It's going to be here,
and it's going to be fast.
Oh yeah, it will. Yes.
So, and that's not even the early, there's something April 1st. I can't even remember off the top of my head, but something's like April 1st. I'm like, oh my God. So they're going to be coming at us, you know, hot and heavy. And that I'm okay with that. So, that just means there's lots more quality content for us to talk about.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. And we look forward to sharing it with all of you guys. So till we get back to you all, don't forget to like us, follow us on social media at BS Movie Podcast. You know how that works. Subscribe on YouTube. If you do that, that's your thing. That's awesome. Till we talk to you again, I am Mark. That is Ryan. Bye, Ryan.
See you guys.
And we'll talk to everyone later.